Chuck, you have just written and published this wonderful book, The Good Life. Yet, in your own personal situation, you've hit some very difficult challenges.
Yeah,
How does it all connect?
Okay, this has been the hardest year of my life, John, I think, because the one thing I feared most in the world, that you'd have a son or a daughter in trouble or physical jeopardy, life in jeopardy. Right after I wrote The Good Life, I learned that my oldest son had cancer of the spine, and it resulted in a 10-hour operation, a terrible operation, to get it removed, and then he's been in extensive chemo and continues today. I thought to myself, if somebody a few years ago had told me I'd have that happen with a child, I'd just think I'd go to the nearest bridge and jump off. But a month later, my daughter, who's so precious to me, I've written about her in The Good Life. She's a single mom raising an autistic child, and she's just a heroine to me. She developed a melanoma on her leg, and melanoma can be a very dangerous form of cancer. I was back in the same hospital, different waiting room, when she was operated on. And this all took place in a period of 3 or 4 months. I had just written The Good Life, and The Good Life talks about you can have a good life. It's not the general public perception of a good life of hedonism. It's a good life in pleasure. It's a good life of dignity and purpose and meaning and giving yourself away and finding truth. But when I wrote The Good Life, one of my good friends, Richard Newhouse in New York, critiqued it for me. And he said, you know, it's a great book, but he said it paints kind of a rosy picture. What happens when things fall apart? Well, that was a prophetic comment, because within a few months they did. What I discovered was what I thought would be unimaginable and unbearable. God gives you the grace to sustain. That's an existential response. I mean, I just discovered grace when I never thought it was possible. Yeah. I found myself feeling guilty sometimes because I was at peace, and I thought I shouldn't be at peace. I should be tearing my clothes off and ripping my hair out. I had a lot of sleepless nights. I had a lot of agonizing moments in the waiting room. But this summer I was away at a friend's house in North Carolina, and I was standing on the porch looking out at the mountains and the Smoky Mountains rising up through the mist and the clouds scudding by. It's a beautiful sight, and you just are so convinced of the reality of God. God is. And what struck me when I was watching that was that God's not a product of my feelings. Maybe I'm not feeling really close at some point to God, but God is still God.
Yeah.
And so our relationship with God does not depend upon our emotions, our feelings. Doesn't even depend on whether He answers our prayers. It doesn't depend on whether He puts us through tough times or good times. God is God, and He created us. And my life and my children's life, their destiny is in His hands. And when it suddenly hit me, I remembered also something else Newhouse had once wrote in his book, As I Lay Dying, which is a wonderful book. I refer to it in The Good Life. Newhouse said when he was lying in the bed and thought he was dying, that he said the great formulation of modern thought was Descartes, sat in the Dutch oven, the Frenchman, trying to figure out the meaning of life, and he came out of it several hours later and he said, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. And that changed the whole way the Western world thought for years. Newhouse said, as I was lying in the bed dying, I thought he shouldn't have said that. He should have said, cogitor ergo sum. I was thought, therefore I am. And we exist and live only because God gives us the life that sustains us. And so even when things are tough, when the world rolls over on top of you, there is a good life. Not that it's without anxiety, pain, suffering, but it is the certain knowledge God is.
Well, you're redefining the good life in that manner is a huge contribution in itself, because we face obstacles every day.
Everybody
and
does.
How we approach that
Yeah.
in faith, in Christ, makes all the difference, doesn't it?
I don't know how you'd face it without faith in Christ. And I must say that, as I said in the introduction of this book, if you haven't had problems, if the world hasn't rolled over on top of you once or twice, please write me, because you'll be the only person I know that hasn't happened. I mean, life is not a bowl of cherries, as Erma Bombeck once said. It's a tough grind to get through this life. It's a spiritual testing period, and sometimes the test can be pretty heavy. I mean, I've been in prison. I've seen my career smashed. I've ended up on an operating room table with an infection and almost died. 3 major surgeries, and now I've had 2 kids very sick and in some peril. I mean, life is not easy. It gives you a lot of empathy for other people, a lot of sympathy for other people, but it also can really strengthen your faith.
And forges something in us that can help us help others.
Exactly.
A friend of mine said, never trust a man who doesn't have a limp. And
Yeah, right.
there's something to that,
There's
isn't there?
a lot to that, great deal to that. We all have our limps. Thank you.
Thank you.